I want to talk to you guys about the Focal Aria K2 936 tower speakers. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasella with Audioholics. James Larson did another great review for us. It's on Focal, and you guys know that I'm a big fan of Focal. We all are big fans of Focal speakers. We've had good experiences with their box speakers as well as their headphones. As you guys know, I have the Stellia headphones. I love those. So I wanted James Larson to take a look at the Aria series of Focals. Those are not quite as high up as price or even build quality per se as the Sopras or even the Cantas, but they're at the point of more affordability for audiophiles. And the new edition, the K2 version of the Aria, did some upgrades on an already good speaker at a very good value to people that are really into high performance speakers. So I wanted James Larson to do a full detailed report. The whole review is on the audioholics.com website. I'll link it down below in the video description. So if you guys want to take a look at his review, it's exhaustive. There's bunches of measurements in there, listening tests, and his perspective on the loudspeaker. But I figured for anybody here that's not interested in reading a 6,000 or 7,000 word review, I'm going to give you a 10-15 minute recap of everything that James said on this product. He was nice enough to do a slide presentation for me to show you guys. And if you're a patron on patreon.com/audioholics, you could download this PowerPoint and you can go along at your leisure as well. So here I am. I'm going to share the screen. This is quite a substantial tower speaker. It's basically a 5-driver speaker. It's got 3 bass drivers, a mid-range, and a tweeter. Substantial size, heavy rigged cabinet. Looks great. And I want to go over all the little details here in this slide presentation. Again, it's the Focal Aria K2 936 floor standing speaker. So let's look at the specs for a minute. The retail on these are $6,600 a pair. I believe that's up about $600-700 from the original 936. The 936 model being the one using the flax drivers, and this one is kind of like a hybrid driver between a fiberglass and another exotic material that Focal claims helps take care of the breakup modes, push them beyond the bandwidth of the driver, and just control those resonances, which is a very important aspect of loudspeaker design. So this model has, like I was saying before, 3 6.5-inch bass drivers, 1 6.5-inch mid-range driver, and these are specifically designed drivers. It's not like they're using the same driver for the woofer and the mid-range. They actually have a specific driver. You'll notice the mid-range driver has kind of looks like a phase plug, but it's more like a dust cap shaped like a phase plug, and I'll show you some more pictures in a minute. And then, of course, they have the 1-inch inverted dome tweeter. Now, I like the fact that they used aluminum and magnesium together. That compound, from my experience with high-frequency drivers, is it really does push the breakup mode high beyond the audible range. It makes that metal dome tweeter sound very smooth. There are cases where I've heard metal domes, whether they be titanium or even pure aluminum, where they just are not as smooth as their silk dome equivalent. This takes that out of the equation. This is almost as good as a beryllium driver. And as you guys know, Focal has some of the best beryllium tweeters on the market. Obviously, that kind of tweeter material is beyond the budget of this tower, but the aluminum magnesium is very close. And as you could see in the listening test that James was doing on these speakers, he never once said that these speakers were overly bright or that they were fatiguing. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they used a really well-behaved tweeter, and that inverted dome actually has really good dispersion characteristics, and I'll show you that in the measurements. Now, the reported frequency response is plus or minus 3 dB from 39 hertz to 28 kilohertz. I'll be honest with you, for $6,000 plus pair of speakers, these speakers probably should have had a little bit more bass extension compared to some of their counterparts, competitors. But there's this thing called a trade-off between sensitivity and bass extension. And I believe Focal's purpose of this speaker is because they realize a lot of people are going to be using it for home theater. They want you to have a more higher sensitive speaker because they know you're going to be using powered subwoofers with a product like this. So I think it's a reasonable trade-off for somebody that is wanting maximum output and efficiency, that you're going to lose some of that really low end response in favor of having a higher sensitivity number. And you could see that here. The sensitivity number is 92 dB at 2.83 volts per meter, which is very good for a speaker of this size. You typically, a tower speaker with a driver complement like this, you probably see around 88 to maybe 90 dB of sensitivity. So the fact that you're getting an extra 2 or 3 dB means that this product will play louder with the same given amplifier power as one that's less sensitive. So that's a really good trade-off. The nominal impedance is 8 ohms. They claim the minimum is 2.8, and we'll go over that in a minute. Power handling up to 300 watts. And you could see by the dimensions of the speaker, 45 inches tall, 9 wide, 14.5 deep, weighs 64 pounds a piece. Pretty substantial product right there. Got some good weight to it, good build quality. And, I really like that kind of piano, kind of almost like a glass top plate that they put on the speaker. I think it adds a touch of class to the product. And this is something that we're familiar with the Canta series that we really liked. It's beautiful to see that. I like the radiused edges on the cabinet, and the bass plinth on the bottom is a really cool touch. And that's there for stability. And it's also there to give you the proper distance between the floor and that port. There's actually a down firing port as well as 2 front firing ports on the speaker. So that plinth actually serves 2 purposes, and I consider it 3 purposes. It gives kind of a classy look to the products. So that looks really neat. We're happy about that. And you can see the Focal logo at the bottom and then the Focal name at the top plate, which is a really nice touch. Again, that carries over from the Canta line. And you guys have seen our video on Canta N2s. We're big fans of those speakers. And here's just some pictures of the drivers. You can see that's the bass driver on the left, and then the inverted aluminum magnesium dome tweeter on the right. And that's the mid-range I was talking about. So it's not a dedicated phase plug driver, but there is a dust cap. It kind of looks like a phase plug. I'm not sure 100% if that's done for performance reasons or if it's just a cosmetic thing that they did. But the point being is the mid-range driver is a dedicated driver for mid-range. It's not just the bass driver being reused for that purpose. Oh, and I wanted to talk about the crossover frequency. So if you go back at the specs, the interesting thing is because they use a 6.5-inch driver, that extended the low end range of that mid-range and increased the sensitivity. And they were able to push the crossover out of the audible range. So that mid-range is playing, from 260 hertz to about 3 kilohertz. So there's no crossover in that critical mid-range area, which means it's a very flat and even response. That's pretty good. I mean, that's a hard thing to pull off unless you have good driver technology and you just have an overall good design. Now, these speakers are not bi-ampable or bi-wireable, and we've seen this on the Cantas as well. They have a single pair of binding posts. I kind of like that approach because, as you guys know, we feel like bi-wiring is a waste of time. There's really no benefit to bi-wiring. And then for bi-amping, that's a different story. There are some benefits potentially to bi-amp if a speaker is really power hungry and you want to have a separate amp for the bass drivers and a separate amp for the mid and tweeter. But in most cases, if you're getting a Focal speaker like this at this price point, you're probably buying a very good amplifier to begin with. And the benefits of passive bi-amping are pretty negligible. And I don't think it's a problem that they don't allow for bi-amplifying on the speaker. And this is, for those that are wondering, why do we measure speakers outside? James Larson built this platform. He takes the speakers outside. He measures them at a fixed distance, same location, puts the microphone at a 2-meter distance, and then he rotates the speaker to get all the different measurements. And the reason why he does this is you want to take the room out of the equation. You want to be able to accurately measure the speaker's performance. We don't listen to the speakers outside. We measure them outside, give you the accurate measurements, and then we do our listening tests in our demo rooms and give you our subjective presentations on that as well. So here's kind of a 3D representation of the frequency response, and you could see the on and off axis is very smooth and continuous. This is a really good measurement. Obviously, there's some beaming at the very high frequencies, above, 8 to 10 kilohertz, which is normal for a dome that doesn't have a big waveguide on it. But this is a very well-behaved response, and I'm going to show you a kind of a side view here. And you can see it's very neutral. This is a speaker that's quite neutral. There's no massive peaks or resonances. It's all well behaved. There's not a huge bump at the high frequencies. Some speakers tend to have an elevated treble response. These are, I would say, on the higher side of neutral, which is really good. And James did not find these speakers fatiguing at all. And the fact that they have good on and off axis frequency response, very similar shape, means that they will do very well in rooms that aren't so heavily treated. You don't have to put a lot of treatments on the sidewalls. And also they're effective to do any EQ. If you want to do EQ, it'll be more useful to do EQ on a speaker that's linear like this, that has good off axis response, than a speaker that doesn't. So this is a really good clean measurement. And then James just shows you the polar plots here. Again, you see a very smooth, continuous, good dispersion characteristics, a little bit beaming at the higher frequencies. I would tell people, and I think James said this in the review, you want to put a slight toe in on these speakers towards the listening area, and you're going to get very good dispersion characteristics, good consistent sound, whether you're sitting to the left or right of the speaker. You don't have to be dead center. But you do want to have good speaker placement and good seating placement for the best performance. And then here we see the low frequency response. And, it's difficult to measure a speaker accurately like this that has ports on the front and bottom. But the bottom line is this speaker does roll off a bit steeper than we'd like to see at a tower of this size. As you can see, it starts rolling off at around 50 hertz. But this doesn't factor in some room gain that you're going to get. And if you look at James's listening test, he said that in most cases, the speaker had plenty of bass. Like, it just hit really hard. It was very clean at very high output levels. Obviously, it doesn't hit the very low registers at the very low frequencies. And in that, if you're listening to that kind of music, I would suggest you get a really good subwoofer. Make sure you get a subwoofer that's capable, one that has really good transient response, one that has lots of output. Because this speaker is not a thumper. It's got good bass, it's linear, but it's not going to shake your house with bass. You're going to definitely want to add one, potentially two powered subwoofers. I always recommend two subs over one, because you get better seat-to-seat consistency, and it's just, the bass sounds more fluid when it's coming from multiple sources as opposed to just one subwoofer. So here's the impedance response, and it basically follows what the manufacturer said. I don't really consider this an 8 ohm speaker, because it does dip down to 2.5, 3 ohms, in a critical area where your amplifier could consume a lot of power, between 100 hertz and a couple of hundred hertz. You definitely want to use an amplifier that's stout. I wouldn't use an entry-level receiver on a speaker like this. This is really a 4 ohm speaker, let's be honest. And you don't want to pair this with a $500 receiver. You want to use something that's got good amplification. If you do have a receiver with preamp outputs, we do recommend you getting a separate amplifier for best performance. But because the sensitivity is good on the speaker, in most cases, if you have a midline receiver, you'll probably be okay. But again, with a speaker that's over $6,000 a pair, put some good amplification on this thing. Get 150, 200 watts a channel that's stable down to 4 ohms, and you'll be rewarded with excellent sound. You want to get the maximum capability of a speaker like this. Don't cheap out on the amplification. And you can see here the frequency responses that James shows from 0 degrees to +10, -10. Very consistent. This is really, really excellent vertical dispersion. So you don't have to be right on the tweeter axis to enjoy this speaker. You could be sitting +10, -10 degrees, and it's very consistent. That's a great response. This is something that shows you don't have to aim the speaker directly at the listener. You could be standing or sitting and you'll still get good response here. That's just great. That looks excellent. And then here we have the horizontal response. Again, very consistent response here, all the way out to 40 degrees or so. I'm impressed. I mean, for a speaker that doesn't use a dedicated waveguide to match directivity with the mid-range, this does really well. And I think a lot of that has to do with that inverted dome that Focal kind of they have a patent on. I mean, they put a lot of research into that. This is an excellent response. You know, look at the 0 to 10, the 20 to 30 degrees, very similar frequency shape, all the way out to the high frequency extremes. This is excellent. This again means that you can EQ the speaker predictably if you want to, and you don't need massive amounts of treatment in a room. A lot of the times people will over-treat a room because their speaker's off-axis response is not consistent and those reflections don't sound good. But in this case, because the speaker's very consistent in how it measures on and off axis, those reflections can be beneficial to add to soundstage of your system. So you do want to maintain some of your reflections. You don't want to over-treat your sidewalls with an accurate speaker like this. And then James just broke down the different measurements to show you, the port contribution, the bass drivers, mid-range, tweeter. There's nothing bad here. There's no bad resonances here. Obviously, the crossover design is well executed. The drivers are not having any massive breakup. This is a clean measurement, taking the speaker apart and showing each contribution of each driver and the port. Again, a very clean, neutral response here. And then he shows the on and with the grill on and off. Obviously, in most cases, we tell you to listen to your speaker with the grill off. Put the grills on when you have kids over in the house, or, you don't want anyone touching the drivers. But if you're really serious about doing critical listening, you'll want to listen to the speaker with the grill off. Obviously, there's some combing effects that the grill is causing, as you can see in the green trace. And the red trace is much smoother with the grill off. Definitely leave the grill off if you can. So what's the bottom line on the Focal K2 Aria 936? Well, they're very good horizontal response on and off axis, wide dispersion, so it covers a large area. You could have multiple seats and still have good sound. High sensitivity, good dynamic range. Again, because the speaker doesn't have a massive amount of bass, they're giving you higher sensitivity and lots of dynamic range. This speaker will play hella loud and really clean. And that's great if you're setting up a home theater or you're listening to 2-channel music and you want to add a couple of subs to, get that last half octave of bass that you may not be getting with authority on a speaker like this. Focal, of course, is always very stylish and they look great. These are beautiful speakers to behold and have high pride of ownership if you have them. And very good build quality, nice attention to detail. They just look very classy. I always consider Focal pieces of furniture that happen to sound good. So the con is you need a large room for best results. The response suffers at lower angles underneath the tweeter. I guess if you get really low, if you're too close to the speaker, you got to watch out for that. You probably, for a speaker like this, you want to be a good, 7 or 8 feet away from to get the best summation. And again, there's not as much low frequency extension as other large towers. We talked about this already. So James's conclusion is it's a stylish, powerful tower that gives up bass for increased dynamic range, holds a very accurate response at or just above the tweeter height and 10 to 30 degrees off axis. High mounted tweeter and suboptimal response under the tweeter angle means it's best for larger rooms, which means you want to get a little bit further away. Like I said, about 8 feet. Some competing speakers, you got the KEF R11s, the Bowers & Wilkins 702 S2s, Ariel Acoustics 6T, which we haven't checked out, Goldner Triton 1 Monitor Audio, 500 7G, Polk Audio Legend, L800, and Revel F226BE. Those are all other alternatives to the speaker. But it's a great speaker overall, guys. If you're a Focal fan, rest assured you're going to get great sound with this speaker. It's got a matching center channel. It's got surrounds in the series. Again, I would recommend pairing these speakers with 2 subwoofers for the best bass extension to get you that full range sound and get incredible dynamic range for music as well as home theater. And I'll put some links down below. Our channel partner, Audio Advice, happens to sell Focal. So if you're interested in purchasing this, I appreciate you taking a look at the links below. And guys, don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics, We appreciate your support. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest video topics or ask questions. Give me some comments if you own these Focal speakers, if you own any other Focal speakers. I want to hear your experiences with the brand. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.